All right. So
Hey.
hopefully this is working now. All right.
Yes.
So, so first off, everyone out there in the world, we're doing this video primarily to give some real basic and helpful information regarding, you know, conscious relationships, regarding sexual energy, things of that nature. So Amira offers a program which deals with what she calls sane and sexy relationships. And she calls it a comprehensive guide to emotional, mental, and spiritual wellness. In myself, I also offer a program which deals with sexual energy cultivation, which is primarily directed towards men, although women can certainly do these very same practices and cultivate the energy in very similar ways. So if you're interested in either one of our coaching programs, you can check out the links which are posted down below the video. So, yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, let's dive into it and just let's start by giving sexual energy 101 fundamentals to just pave the way for people to have a solid understanding about what our programs are about and also to benefit from the information we're going to offer. Mm-hmm. So what do you have in mind? What do you want to start with?
Well, so first off, if we're going to do 101, you kind of have to sort of dig into what's the problem, right? And so it's not just, you know, it's not beneficial just to recognize the problem itself. We also have to say, okay, and be honest with ourselves. I'm speaking a lot about men here again. We have to be very honest with ourselves as men, how we misuse and abuse sexual energy. So, other words, problem, then we have a reaction, which is the results of our either conscious use or lack of conscious use of our sexual energy. And then finally, we have to have a solution. So what I want to kind of talk about is how do we get to the point of having a solution and I guess creating different results in how a man or a woman, I guess, utilizes their sexual energy. So the problem as I perceive it is that there is a lack of consciousness in general. There's a conditioning, and I'm not going to create victims here. So there's a conditioning around how men primarily use their sexual energy. We tend to waste it. We tend to just treat it very frivolously. Like most men, they start masturbating when they were 13, 14, 15 years old, and they just simply discharge the energy all the time. And again, when you're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, you can recover relatively quickly. But as men grow older, and I would say as a man approaches what would be their quote unquote their Saturn's return, which is right around the age of 28 to 35, they're going to start to notice issues. If a man has abused his sexual energy, if he's consistently discharges energy at too high a frequency, if he's essentially, or let's say he's engaged in too many partners, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, he's being unconscious about his behaviors. You're going to start to accumulate what I would call sexual karma. And the sexual karma is premature ejaculation starts to happen because you've conditioned yourself into that state. The other condition that can rise is erectile dysfunction. I've had a man who is only 28 years old, couldn't get erections anymore, and this is not unusual. Yeah. Although it's rare, but it's not. It's not unusual.
I've seen it.
I asked him a real simple question. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Right? Mm-hmm. What are you doing with your sexual energy? He's like, what do you mean? And I was like, how often? I know it's ridiculous. And then I was like, listen, if you can't get an erection at age 28, you've got all the human growth hormone you could possibly need. You've got all the biochemistry you could possibly need in order to produce very turgid erections. So there is no reason you should be limp. So I said, what are you doing? And he says, what do you mean? And I said, how many times a day are you ejaculating? He's like, up to 3. And I'm like, what? And I was like, you don't think this has an impact? And so the guy goes and says, well, no, my psychologist says that it's healthy for a man to ejaculate because of stress relief and it's good for his prostate. And I told him, I was like, listen, your psychologist took no biochemistry. Your psychologist doesn't have a degree in physiology. Your psychologist is interested in you not having shame nor guilt, which you shouldn't have. So your psychologist is correct in terms of you should not have shame nor guilt. However, he does not understand human energetics. He doesn't understand that every discharge creates a depletion. So if you continuously empty the well, then what do you got, right? You don't have the energy to build this back up. So I told the guy, simple solution. So, right, problem, couldn't get an erection. Solution, or rather the reaction was, oh, I don't know what's going on. So he consults with me trying to find out how I can help him. Then I tell him, you need to stop beating off. And he gets upset. Oh, but that's good for me. Again, men can become very resistant to changing these patterns because we've been told certain things, or we live in a culture which I would say at this point in history is overly permissive. Meaning like, hey, do what you want, be free with your energy. Great. Yes, I know. Don't have shame, don't have guilt. But you still have to deal with the natural sort of, when I was studying to be a dietitian, they used to talk about calories in, calories out. If someone was interested in losing weight, they said, well, you have to reduce the calories in and increase the calories out, right? So everything really has a sort of, what I call it, like a human energetics, or like an economics is kind of integrated in here. So the idea of, if you're discharging a lot of energy, it's going to require time for that energy to rebuild.
To build up. Yeah.
Exactly. So he wasn't considering that factor. So an overly permissive culture, structured, again, we have a culture that's very open to pornography, at least here in the US, very open to pornography, very open to masturbation, very accepting of all sorts of sexual expression. In fact, much of our culture is obsessed about sexual expression. So that being said, how does an individual navigate all this? Constant stimulation through advertising, through this, through that. So in other words, a man really needs to be able to operate through choice. That's the solution. The solution is choice. Can he say, oh, there's the horny feeling, so what? So what? I don't need to do anything with it. I don't have to express it, nor do I have to repress it. I can just sit there and take a deep breath, contract my genitals, feel the energy, exhale, pull root lock, whatever you want to do to engage that energy. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Some of them physical, some of them dealing with breath, some of them dealing with mental, psychological. And again, these are all wrapped up in the sort of program I've created. And like I said, in the end, my mission is to let men know there's choice.
There's a choice.
When they do make that choice, whether they're choosing just to say, hey, I'm going to remain on a mundane level, that's fine as well. Or if they're interested in elevating their energy up to the point where they can actually participate in sacred sexual practices such as Tantra, Karisa, or any of the Taoist sexual practices, once you decide where you want to take this energy, then, like I said, there are programs out there available, mine included, in which you can do this. So anyway, that's the 101 of sexual energy, what I would consider is the problem, reaction, and the solution. So yeah.
So from my perspective, I would also address one of the most common things that my clients come up with during our sessions, whether it's a couples therapy or just an individual therapy for even singles. And people always complain about, oh, whether they are men or women. Also, I mean, I want to demystify that now women, because they also watch porn, they have different expectations from themselves, and they want to kind of like get on the bandwagon of the porn, which is not how women are wired. So the most common question is, how do I get better orgasms, or how do I get more orgasms? So let's actually, in order to be able to understand that, we have to go to back up a little bit, which is, how do sexual energy work? How do masculine energy work? And how do feminine energy work? So feminine energy trickles like water drops from up to down to your genitals, okay? While masculine energy shoots like a fire hose from the root up to your let's say seventh chakra or crown chakra. So they actually work in an opposite way. So what does that imply? It implies that when when we, metaphorically speaking, women, when we talk, oh, this man is a dog, he only thinks with his cock, he doesn't, he gets an erection like that, and then that's it, that's all he wants. Actually, this is how the masculine energy works. It starts from his genitalia. That's why men get super excited. It's not something wrong or something bad.
Mm.
And the women, they need more time. That is why they say men fall in love with their eyes, because that's why they get stimulation immediately and you can see it. And women fall in love with their ears because the feminine energy starts from the crown down. And how we reconcile this is when the energy meets in the heart chakra. When the sexual energy meets in the heart chakra, which means that it needs the two T's, teasing and time. Teasing and time is the key to better sex, to longer orgasms, to quality sex. So that is where the man has to make, you are the fire. You need to give it time for the water to boil. But when the water boils, it will take longer and longer. But if you just, you know, go in without having prepared your woman physically, mentally, emotionally, and it's also for the man. You need time and teasing and foreplay for the energy to be ready to travel up to the heart chakra. And then you will hear about people who are talking about multi orgasms, whole body orgasm, brain orgasm. It doesn't happen in the 11 seconds. It doesn't happen. You need to both prepare yourself. You need to prep your partner in every single way and enjoy it. So also I always coach my clients, think pleasure, don't think orgasm. When the pleasure is the destination, everything is pleasurable, everything will turn you on.
Mhm.
And even when I was studying traditional Chinese medicine, and I was studying Taoism, and they were saying that there are four stages of erection, and a man should not penetrate the woman until he's literally hot and hard, not softy, not a little bit, not halfway there. No, no, because this is where you know that the energy is prepped and you are ready to penetrate, and your woman is juicy and lubricated. Teasing and time. But if you have this objective of, oh, I want to get it over with, and then I want to watch some Netflix, or I want to go and take a shower, or I want to go and eat, then don't do it.
Mhm.
Don't ask about taking your sexual life to another level. It doesn't work. Even in traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, when couples used to have kidney problems or liver problems, they were saying in the literature of the TCM that the physician used to send couples to have sex. Why? Because when they have sex, they can direct the energy. The sexual energy is so potent. It's the energy of creation. You literally create another human being with that energy. They can, with the focus and before ejaculation and even before or having an orgasm, direct the energy to the kidney or to the liver, and they can visualize together, and this can help the problem heal.
Mhm.
That is why people, like these buzzwords, they are just so disgusting, man. They don't know what they are talking about. Like you see all these people talking about six magic, six. It's not about six magic. I mean, yes, of course, but you have to understand how it works. It's not some mumbo jumbo, crap. You have to know these things work, but you need to know the fundamentals of how it works. You need
Mhm.
to know that when you step into a sexual encounter and you want to make the best of it, give it time, give your partner time, and then take it from there.
Yep. Yep. So a couple of things that came up while you were speaking, is one is you implied something which is really powerful, which is intention. Is it directs the flow of energy, right? So So even if it's operating in the sort of mental emotional field, right, in the sort of electromagnetic body, the moment you set an intention, the mind goes in a particular way, then the energy will start to flow to that. And what do I mean by this? So let's say someone's interested in some sort of sacred sexual practice. Well, a big part of a sacred sexual practice is the creation of a ritual. So what ends up happening is, if the intention is, I'm not going to have mundane, regular mountain pound sex, right? That's not my intention. So immediately you choose something different. So you choose, I want to have a sacred sexual practice because of everything you just mentioned, which is really it's about magnitude of orgasm, right? So although, as you also implied, it's really about enjoying the pleasure. So in other words, looking at pleasure as a pathway into the body, right? So pleasure is a pathway into the body, into connecting. So when one sets an intention to have a sacred sexual practice as opposed to mundane sex, for a man, let's say a man like myself, I'm a Pisces, everything operates in the realm of fantasy. So when I commit to a sacred sexual practice, it means I'm going to commit to feeling and sensing, and not the pursuit of a kink or fantasy. So in other words, I'm going to commit to connecting with the person I'm with. So that's a very powerful intention, because I could easily go the other way. I could easily go into what content always works for me, right? There are certain fantasies that will always work for me. They always will. Whether or not I need to fulfill these fantasies isn't the point. The point is that I understand them. And the point is that I understand that they always work for me, but they don't necessarily lead to a deeper connection with my partner. So in order for me, I have to set that intention to be present, right? I'm going to be present. I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to do breath work. And then I'm going to do body work on my partner. Then we're going to progress into the sexual dynamic. So, and again, I've laid this all out in the program I offer, whatever. But the other thing I wanted to mention is also this idea of what are the things that I guess cumulatively, at least, and again, I'll speak for the man's perspective, because a man only gets one orgasm. I know there's guys out there like, oh, I can come like 6 times in a night. And I'm like, no, you can't. And if you do, the first time is the best, and every other additional time is just draining. Like, can you get it up a little bit? Yeah, you're like super turgid at the beginning, and then it's like this, and then it's like this, and then it's like this. And then after a while, you're forcing it. So the reality is you want that one. You want to maintain that high charge, that high pressure, that sort of that conscious aggressiveness, right? Like that's the other thing, is how does a man not get wrapped up into his sexual energy where he starts to become overly consumed by his own pleasure? I always tell dudes, don't focus on your pleasure, focus on hers, because she's the one ultimately, like all a man has to do in terms of a sacred sexual practice, a man just has to abstain from ejaculation. He just has to abstain. In other words, he has to drive the woman, because it's the woman that's driving the peaks. She has an orgasm, then there's a little bit of a lull, and then she has another orgasm, and she's driving the peaks of the wave. And some people, like, they talk about these tantric experiences, they don't realize that it goes through waves and periods, which is one of the reasons why oftentimes these kinds of practices take a lot of time. I mean, everyone's heard these stories about Sting, Sting has sex for 9 hours. Well, he probably wasn't having sex for 9 hours straight. There was probably meditation involved. There was probably breath work involved. There was probably a lot of different things involved. But going back to this idea of the magnitude of orgasm, this is an incredibly important concept, because if a man has just a basic orgasm, it's like bloop, bloop. In other words, he's looking at pornography, he's handling himself, or let's say he's in fantasy and he's with the person he's with, but he's not really with them. Then what ends up happening is the orgasm tends to be really weak, and he's denied himself something important. And dudes, we tend to repress emotions. And emotion in this context, as I'm speaking about, is energy in motion. That's it. I don't mean it in the sense of like, oh, you need to cry, or you got to deal with your anger. Like, I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is that an orgasm can bring about catharsis, and it can be completely non-specific. I know a lot of men who are watching this probably have had orgasms in which they laugh hysterically or they cry or a number of things rise. But the reality is we need that kind of thing. Guys get a little bit locked on life. And when we become locked on, we don't really have time to deal with the emotional content. I think I read a study somewhere that basically said that dudes on average cry once or twice a year, right? Women on average cry once or twice a month. And so, in other words, women have access to that sort of emotional release, where dudes, we let it build up until we about explode. So the reality is, how can we make that explosion pleasurable, intense, powerful, cathartic, rich, and you walk away from the experience completely satiated? The only way to do it is to develop magnitude of orgasm, is to build it to its highest degree possible, which means driving her to various peaks. And also secondarily, what are the factors? So you have time. You mentioned time. So that's the acute. So you have acute time and you have chronic time. Acute time is in the moment of the sexual act itself, right? It's got to be more than 15 minutes. It's got to be more than 30 minutes. Like there's got to be buildup. It's got to be lots of buildup. She's got to be in her body. You've got to be in your body, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So then you have chronically. So this is where it comes in. The men need to refrain from ejaculation for some period of time, because the greater the pressure, the greater the buildup, the greater the magnitude. Another factor, and this is really has to do with the nature of the connection between the individuals. So this goes back to intention setting at the beginning of the sexual experience. Is the guy saying, I'm going to be totally present. I'm not going to get up in kinky thoughts or whatever it is, and I'm going to be present with my partner. What does that do? That opens the energy body. That opens the energy body so that there can be a connection and a flow. It's a circular connection and flow between the two individuals. This only happens if there's presence. Every one of us, if I'm sure, have had experiences sexually at some point where the other person doesn't even want to make eye contact with you, which is bizarre. I had a woman I was having sex with one point a long time ago. I'm inside of her. And she's like, and I'm trying to make eye contact. And she's like, could you not do that? And I just remember kind of like, oh, that's the most insulting thing anyone said to me ever. And it was deeply insulting. Like, my penis is inside of you, and yet you don't want me to look at you. That's bizarre. That's bizarre. We're at the greatest depths of intimacy. And this tells you there's an issue here as how people perceive sex. Like, either we perceive it way too frivolously, where it's like we forget the fact that this is, as you implied earlier, that this is the creative charge that can bring life into the world, right? Or we overly moralize it, like has happened in the past with like a lot of religious structures where, where it's only about procreation and there is no pleasure aspect. Well, then you cut off the body. So gosh, there's got to be a balance here, right? And balance, so programs like yourself, programs like myself help these individuals find this particular balance. Then the final thing I'll say about the sort of increasing magnitude of orgasm has to do with communication. So, and what I mean by communication is that if the communication, so this is before sex and during sex. Before sex, if there's, let's say, what's the word I want to use? Conflict, right? So there's a conflict, there's resentments between the two individuals. Unresolved, it makes things like eye contact more difficult. There needs to be honesty. There needs to be communication. So if there's good honesty in the relationship, good communication in the relationship, the sexual dynamic is going to be more fluid, and it's going to lead to greater orgasms in the end. And also during the act itself, having good communication, meaning like the woman is sensitive to when the guy is reaching his edge. So she, let's say she's on top and she's doing the movement, then what ends up happening is that, so if she gets too caught up and is unaware of where he's at, then she could drive him to orgasm too quickly, and that cuts it short. And then the other way around, which is a man getting all wrapped up in his drive and not realizing she's not ready for him, right? And so she's not open yet. So communication is incredibly important. And again, all these factors add up to very powerful orgasms. And along with the application of certain tricks, that's the other thing that can increase magnitude of orgasm is, tricks like Mahabandha, or I think Mantak Chia talks about the big draw, things of that nature, which increase the magnitude of orgasm. So yeah, anyway, those are my
I think it's good to cover maybe so many of these aspects like individually, like kind of like to expand more on them. So maybe we can dedicate 2 more podcasts just to talk only about communication and resolving conflict and go in depth a bit on that for the next podcast. So our next podcast, maybe we will cover something about more about intention. We'll go more into depth about that and maybe resolving conflict. What do you think?
Good ideas. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're wrapping it up, guys, and we would love to hear your thoughts and your comments about this content. And if you think it's beneficial, or even if you need to know something more, we would love to hear from you. We will have all our social handles in the description box, and we will have links to our programs where you can go and check it out. And see you in the next podcast. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you, Mayor.